Hi everyone, and welcome to the Scrap and Create YouTube channel. My name is Christine Riley. I am a customer of Scrap and Create and a lover of Julie and Daphne's store. And so I had offered to do a walkthrough of a mini album that I created using products that you can purchase at their store. And I did the walkthrough, and there will be a link to the walkthrough of this album in the description box of this video below. But it uses the Ladies Diary Deluxe Collector's Edition. It only uses one of them. So you can make this whole album with just one pack of the deluxe collection edition of the Ladies Diary papers. It's beautiful papers to work with. So when I posted the walkthrough of the album, I did offer to do a tutorial if there was any interest, and you guys were so kind and so wonderful, and it was so humbling to see how much you guys liked the album and wished for a tutorial. So here I am with part one of the tutorial on how to put this album together. I want to start by saying I am in no way whatsoever a mini album expert. I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, so I make cards. I have been making mini albums for years because I like to do my own family memory keeping and things of that nature. So I've been making them for a long time, but I am in no way an expert. But I'm happy to show you the way that I put my album together. And hopefully some of you will find it helpful. So just briefly, this album measures 7 inches by 9 inches, which means that the pages are ½ inch smaller. So the actual pages are 6.5 by 8.5, and the covers are 7 by 9. The spine is 2.5 inches by 9 inches. There's the back as well. I'm going to be breaking the tutorial on how I put this album together up into 3 parts. So the first part is this video today, and this video is going to focus on creating the actual base album, the binding mechanism, and the pages. And then video number 2 will be personalizing those pages to this album. In other words, creating the pockets and flaps and pullouts and things like of that nature. And then the third video in this series will be actually decorating the album. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video tutorial, which will just be the base album and the pages, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Everything that you need in terms of a cut list for part 1 of this album is in the description box of this video below, so you don't have to take notes or anything while you're watching this video. You can just print that information out if you like. What you want to start out with is some medium weight chipboard. You can get this at Scrap and Create, and you want to cut 3 pieces. 2 of them will be 7 by 9. This is your front cover and your back cover, and then your spine will be 2.5 by 9. Okay? So what we want to do first, once you've cut your chipboard, and just to save time, I pre-cut a lot of the things that we're going to be working on today, just because I didn't want this video to be too terribly long. So, you know, if you need to pause or whatever as we're going through, that's totally fine. You can also fast forward, or if you know how to make an album, you might just be able to look at the cut list and ignore this video completely if you like. But I wanted to really go over everything from start to finish for this album, so any crafter of any level could create this mini album. So the first thing that we want to do once you've cut your chipboard is we want to cover our album. And what that simply means is that you use the cardstock color paper that you're going to be using for your pages of your album to cover nicely the cover, back cover, spine of your album, so we don't see this ugly chipboard, okay? Now, for the original album, I used black cardstock in the construction of my album and my pages. But for this tutorial, I'm actually going to use cream. And the reason is because first, I think it would also look beautiful with the paper collection. And second, I think it's a little bit easier to see score lines and things of that nature when I'm working with a lighter color cardstock on camera for a video tutorial. So we're going to use cream today. So to do the covers of the chipboard, you want to grab 2 pieces of 12 by 12 cardstock. And again, I chose the cream color. Alrighty, and you want to cut them down to 11 by 11. Alright, so take 2 12 by 12 pieces and cut them to 11 by 11. I've already cut them. I'm going to go ahead now and grab my scoreboard. You can use any scoring tool that you have. Some trimmers even have scoring blades on them, so whatever you're comfortable with. And on the left side of one of the pieces of 11 by 11, you want to score at 1 inch. Now you want to turn this one time to the right clockwise and score at 1 inch again, all right? That will give you this little corner here. Can you guys see that? There's this little scored corner here. And this is going to help dictate where we place the cover of our album. We're gonna line it up and it's gonna help us get it nice and straight. We're gonna line it up where these score lines meet. And the reason we cut it to 11 by 11 is I have found you really only need 1 inch on either side of your chipboard to properly cover the album. So this leaves 1 inch on all sides, alrighty? So with your second 11 by 11 piece of cardstock, you're just gonna score along one side at 1 inch. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then you're done with your scoreboard for now. The next thing that we want to do is we need to adhere these two pieces of cardstock together. All right, so let's go ahead and grab our 3/8 inch score tape. I use score tape for basically the entirety of the creation of the actual album itself, as well as the binding mechanism, as well as all the flaps and pockets. So it is so important to have good score tape available when creating a mini album. The best size is the 3/8 of an inch because I'm always using 1/2 inch flaps and for my pockets and flaps and pullouts and things like that. So the 3/8 of an inch works perfectly. However, if you just have 1/4 of an inch, that will work okay as well. So I'm going to turn this to the side. We have our little V where those two score lines meet in this upper corner. So I'm just going to add a piece of 3/8 score tape here along this edge, right up along the edge, and we're just going to connect these two large pieces of cardstock together. This is just a little tool that I use to tear. It helps to tear the score tape rather. It also has other functions, but I won't be using it for those functions today because maybe not all of you own this little gadget. So I'm going to show you how to do it in other ways. All right, so now we just need to adhere this on top of this and create this little seam here. Alrighty, so the way that we're going to do that is we are going to turn it this way, and I'm going to start to peel off the tape here. And I'm going to peel about half of it off. Pardon me, excuse my voice. I'm getting over a horrible sinus infection, so I'm not all together back to myself yet. So I have a little bit of a funny voice. Okay, so I'm going to adhere this down. Get it nice and lined up here. Okay. All right, and we're just going to tear now the remainder of the score tape backing off and push this down. We'll give it a nice burnish with our bone folder. And it looks like I made a slight boo-boo with my paper trimmer, and it's a little bit taller on one side than the other, just a slight bit there. So I'm just going to take my scissors and trim that. All of this is going to be on the inside and then covered up, so it doesn't really matter. I probably just wasn't paying close enough attention and didn't get it right on the 11-inch mark as I was trimming on my paper trimmer, and that's all. So, but don't worry, this entire inside is not going to show when everything is said and done. Okay, so now that we have these two pieces, let me kind of push my tools out of the way. We have these two pieces here, and they're connected in the middle. So now they are firmly adhered in the middle. Now we can go ahead and start laying out our cardboard, or chipboard rather. So what I like to do is just set it down first, just to plan. So I'm not taking any tape off or anything. I'm just setting it down for planning purposes. We know we want our cover, our spine, and then our back cover. And we want to leave little gaps in between here, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. When you're laying it out, just make sure that this little seam that you have created here when you combined these two large pieces of paper is not in the gap. And it looks like it's not. It's still going to be on our spine piece, and that's where you want it. So you wouldn't want it here, right, in between these two elements. Okay, you want to make sure it's on either the back cover or the spine. Okay, and it looks like we've got that good to go. So let's go ahead now and start adhering our pieces so we can wrap this this cardstock over our chipboard, and then we will have created the book, which is pretty cool. So go ahead, and what you want to do is on the back, put your score tape. I like to do a perimeter around the sides, and then I like to make an X in the middle. Go ahead and then burnish the tape. Burnishing just means you're rubbing something. I like to use a bone folder over that tape to get it nice and stuck into the fibers of either your cardstock or your chipboard, whatever you're working on. And it also helps you be better able to peel off the backings of the score tape as well. So let's go ahead and peel off all these backings now once you've applied your tape. Again, just to save time, I had already gone ahead and applied my tape, just so you guys didn't have to watch me do that. But as you see, again, I just made a perimeter around the rectangle, and then I did an X in the center. Peeling off all of the backings of all of the score tape here. And then what I'm going to do is in the little gaps, I'm just going to add some art glitter glue. This is the only glue that I use when making mini albums. I use score tape and art glitter glue to adhere. And you could definitely just put score tape all over the back of your covers if you wanted to. But I find that this works well for me, and the glitter glue just sort of, you know, adds a little bit of extra, and I save a little bit of money on my score tape by not using quite so much. So I find that this works for me. But if you want to score tape the entire back of the front covers, that's totally fine. You can absolutely do that. So now it's time, again, it's going to be a little hard to see on camera, but we have this little L that we've created with our score lines. And we want to place this cover here, right so it's flush up against the line on the left and the line along the bottom, the score lines along the bottom, so that this is nice and straight. And sometimes you have to pick it up because it's starting to go wonky, so you got to pick it up and fix it real quick before that tape adheres. So just do the best that you can, but you do want to get this as straight as humanly possible, and that looks really good. So we have it lined up on this score line and this one. So now I'm comfortable letting go and sticking it down, and I'm going to go ahead and take my bone folder and give this a nice burnish, just letting that tape and that glue really adhere to the cardstock. Okay, the next step would be to adhere our spine piece, but we want to leave a little gap in between the cover, the spine, and the back cover. And I have found that the best way to do that for me is to grab a piece of 1/8 inch score tape and lay it down right there, and then butt the spine piece right up next to it. Now, if you don't have 1/8 size score tape, that's okay. You can do it another way. What you can do is take 3 scrap pieces of the chipboard that you're using for your album. This measures 1/8 of an inch, and you can just put that right up against the cover and then adhere your spine right down, and you'll get the same spacing, okay? But if you have the 1/8 of an inch, it just makes it a little bit more convenient. So I'm going to go ahead and use it on mine. So I'm just butting this 1/8 score tape right up against the cover, okay? Right up against the cover. And then I'm going to go ahead and just tear it off there. Okay, now I'm going to leave the backing on for the time being, and I'll tell you when to go ahead and take that backing off, all right? So now let's turn it back this way, and it's time to go ahead and adhere our spine piece down to our cover wrapping. Again, just make sure that seam is on your spine piece and not in the gap area where you would be placing the 1/8 inch score tape. I went ahead and I always cover the entirety of my spine with score tape, because the spine is structurally, the spine and the binding are the most important structural part of your book. So go ahead and apply score tape to the back of your spine piece, and once you've done that, you can go ahead and remove the score tape backing. I use this little pick tool sometimes. If you have a Cricut or a Silhouette, you got a tool that looks like this in your kit. I don't know what it's used for with those cutting machines, but it is a fantastic tool for getting the backings off of score tape. It's really, really good for that. So sometimes I use it for that if the tape's being a little stubborn and doesn't want to come up with just my fingernails. So anyway, I don't know what to even call. You could use a paper piercer too. I don't know what this thing is called. I just have found that it works, but a paper piercer would work great too. Okay, so I've got all the backings off of the score tape. Now, if you have any tape that's kind of extending beyond the chipboard, just take your finger and make sure to kind of fold that over, because you don't want any tape expanding out, if that makes sense, because then you'll just get weird things sticking to things and you don't want that. So now it's time to line this up. We have this score line, remember, that we put all along the bottom here. So we want to make sure we have it butted up against this 1/8 score tape, lined up nicely along the bottom and next to our cover. And that looks really good, so I'm going to go ahead and stick it down. And then I'm going to use my bone folder and give it a nice burnish. And now all that's left is the back cover. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it this way and grab that 1/8 score tape again to make my little gap. Remember, if you don't have the 1/8 score tape, no big deal. Just take 3 pieces of the chipboard that you're using for your album that are just scrap pieces, glue them together and make yourself a little shim, and that will be the exact perfect space for your spacing between your spine and covers. All right, so we've got that 1/8 tape down now, and now we're going to bring over our back cover, and we're going to line it up just like we have been with all the other pieces. Make sure it's nice and lined up along the bottom and next to our spine there. Okay, that looks good. So I went ahead and put score tape around the perimeter and made my X again. So let's go ahead and burnish quickly this tape. And then we'll remove the backing. All right, I'm gonna take some of that glue again and just fill in the little spaces that don't have tape. Again, you could tape the whole thing if you wanted to. I've just found that this works for me, and I try to be economical and use the score tape as little as possible just because it is a little pricey. Worth it, definitely, but it does, you know, it costs a little bit, so I try to be frugal with it when I can. And now we just want to make sure that we're on the score line on the bottom and that we're right up against that 1/8 inch score tape. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice burnish with my bone folder. Now, as I said at the beginning, you only need about 1 inch on either side of the album. So let's go ahead and just trim off this excess because we just don't need it and it can get cumbersome working with more paper than you need. So I'm just going to measure over 1 inch with my ruler, and I'm going to add a little pencil mark there. And then I'm going to grab my trimmer, and I'm just going to trim that section off. Okay, so now we are ready to wrap this cardstock around our chipboard. So let's grab our 3/8 of an inch score tape again. Before we do that, let's just give our paper a little bend around. I like to really get the paper going and getting used to bending in the direction that I want it to go in. So I like to start bending before I even put any tape on, just so this paper knows this is the direction you're gonna be going in, all right? So get prepared, right? Okay, so now let's go ahead, before we add our 3/8 inch, let's grab a little pick tool or whatever you have, paper piercer, whatever, and let's take the backing off of this 1/8 spacer tape that we have here. All right. Now what I want to do is go ahead and grab that 3/8 inch score tape here, and we're gonna put it all along the bottom of our chipboard. All right, so straight along the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and tear that off. And now put it on the cardstock itself. Okay, so we've done the bottom of the chipboard, and you're only going to the edge. You don't have to come here into the corner. So we've done the bottom of the chipboard, and now we're doing the bottom of the cardstock. And then just go ahead and tear it. I'm going to turn this now, and we're going to do the same thing along the top of our book. Okay, so we're going to run the score tape along the top of the chipboard, like so, right over the exposed now 1/8 spaces, right over top of that. And then we're going to do the same thing on the cardstock itself. Again, you don't have to go all the way to the corner, just right here. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing on the sides. So let me just move this over here. Make sure I'm in frame. We're going to put tape here along the edge here of the card, or the chipboard rather, I'm sorry. And then we're going to do the same thing on the cardstock itself again. And again, you don't have to go into the corners. You're just going to the top of the chipboard. That right there. And then we'll do the same thing one more time. My glitter glue keeps falling over. Okay, we're going to do the same thing one more time on this edge down here. So just a little line of score tape. And a line of score tape. Alrighty, so there we go. Now go ahead and grab your bone folder and let's give this tape nice burnishing. Kind of get in those little crevices. Gentle though, you don't want to rip your tape or anything, but just kind of give this a burnish here. Okay, so that's all nice and down. And it's not looking like much yet, right? But we're going to get there. This is going to turn into a book. And it's so cool how it happens. If you've never made a mini album before, it's so cool. So the next thing that we need to do, because we're going to obviously be wrapping this book, this cardstock around this book, right? But look here at the corner. Look how funny that's going to look if we just bend that over. That's just going to look really silly. So what we do is we do something that's called burnishing our corners. All that simply means is basically cutting it at a diagonal, leaving some space from the corner edge of the chipboard, and you want to leave a little bit of room there. So you want to leave a little bit of cardstock extending beyond that corner. There are lots of ways to do this. What I used to do is I would just grab a ruler. I would measure out from the corner 1/8 of an inch, which is about here. I mean, this is not exactly how you would properly measure something, but you get the idea. This worked for me. And then I just draw a line from that little mark. Okay? This tool that I use to cut my score tape is also used for this, but I'm not going to show you this because, again, I don't know how many people have it or whatnot, and I've had it for years. I don't even know if they still sell it. So that's why I'm showing you these other ways to do it. So you can use the ruler trick. Just draw that line there. We'll do that on 2 of the sides. So again, I'm right in the corner. I'm finding 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm just putting my ruler up like so and drawing a line across that diagonal. Okay. The other way to do it is the same way you could do your spaces in between your chipboard if you don't have the 1/8 score tape. And that is, you just, again, you grab that little shim, right, that you made, which is just 3 pieces of chipboard. I keep wanting to say cardstock instead of chipboard. Put it in the corner and then draw your line like so. And then we'll do that on this final corner as well. So those are 2 different ways that you can do this without having any type of special tool. Just use your ruler or use that shim, okay? Because you want to come out about 1/8 of an inch from the corner and then draw your line. The next thing that you're going to do after you've drawn your line is cut. All right, so we're going to cut off the little triangle edge ends of our cardstock wrap. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this one. Okay, I'm going to cut this one. And then finally, we're going to cut this one. Okay, you can just obviously throw these scraps away. All right, so now what we have is cardstock that's going to much more easily allow us to cover those corners and make it look more professional, like an actual book. And I'll show you that when we get there. So now what I want you to do before you take off any tape is just bend this cardstock again. All right, bend it around on all 4 sides of the book so it just knows where it's supposed to go once we start taking this tape off. So right now I'm just bending, no tape has been removed, just getting that cardstock ready to go. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the backing, but not of all of the tape, just most of it. So we're going to remove the long ends, both on the chipboard and the cardstock. Okay, so you can flip it around, do the same thing. So long ends, we're removing the backings on the chipboard and the cardstock. By the way, I have a trash can behind me, so I promise I'm not just throwing these, these scraps on the floor. Might look funny on the video, I'm not sure. Now we just want to take on the short sides, just take the tape backing off of the tape that's on the actual chipboard. Leave the backing for now on the cardstock itself. All right, now turn it back so it's facing upwards towards you. And go ahead and just bend it one more time before you stick it down. And then I like to stick it down in the middle and then work my way to the right and to the left. Okay, now that I've got that nice and stuck down, I'm going to give it a burnish with my bone folder. We're going to come and turn it this way now and do the top of the book. Same way, okay? Got a little bit of tape hanging over, so I'm going to make sure and just stick that to itself really quickly there. Just a little bit off the edge there. Okay. Now again, so once you've got it nice and bendy and it knows, the paper knows who's boss and it knows where it needs to go, you can go ahead and stick it down. And I like to work in the middle, start in the middle and work my way out like that. And then give it a nice little burnish. Now, the reason that we cut those corners is to make it easier to get this book so that it looks professional in the corners and we don't have pointy cardstock or pointy edges to our book. But I always cut a little bit more, I always leave a little bit more cardstock than I need to when I cut. That's why I say about 1/8 of an inch, because I don't want to cut too much, because if you cut too much, then the tippy corner of that cardstock may show through. Now, if you're using black cardstock and black chipboard, that might not be a big deal. Even if you're using black cardstock and tan chipboard, you can cover that up with a black Sharpie and it might not be noticeable. But when you're using cream or ivory colored, you definitely want to make sure you leave enough so that this corner can be covered. Now, if I just cover it right now like this, there's a little bit of an excess here. So it's going to look a little funky and a little pointy at that tip there. So what I do is I take my bone folder and there's this little excess right here. And all I do is poke that little bit in. Okay, so I'm just poking that little bit in with my bone folder. So now it's flat and even, that tiny little corner there with the edge of the book. Let me bring this up and show you what I did. So right here, can you guys see that little tuck right there that I did? I just tucked that corner right in. I'm going to do the same thing now up top here. So I'm going to turn it this way. Actually, I'm not, because I'm right-handed and that's not going to work. So I'm going to turn it this way, make sure I'm on camera. And again, I'm just going to tuck this right in. So you're just taking the little bit of excess and you're going to tuck it right into the little crevice here between the chipboard and the cardstock. And that is going to help our book look great from the front. All right, so we have these little pieces. Now what we can do is turn the book this way, tear off the backing of this piece of score tape that's on the cardstock itself, and then simply again start in the middle and push it down. And there we go. Now, I never get my insides to look perfect, but I don't care because I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover the whole inside up. So all I worry about is, does it look nice from the outside? And it definitely does, as you can see there. We've got nice pointy corners there. All right, so I'm going to give this a nice burnish, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So we're just going to take our bone folder and just sort of tuck this little part in. We'll do the same thing up here. And just use our bone folder and tuck this little corner in, like so. Okay, then I'll turn it this way. I will remove the tape backing, and then down it goes, like so. Okay. Again, my insides are never quite as beautiful as I would like, but on the outside we have a really nice corners there. All right, so there we go. Now what I want to do is just take the rounded dull part of my bone folder, and I'm just going to really rub this cardstock into that 1/8 of an inch spacer there. And then I'm just going to very slowly start to pull the pages up like so, just to get them bending the way a book would bend. You don't want to go too fast, and you don't want to go like automatically just pull one part of the book, you know, pull it closed so these are touching. If you do that, you're probably going to rip your cardstock. So you just have to be gentle and slow with the process. Okay, so you just kind of wiggle it till you get it exactly how you want it. All right, there we go. And that is looking good. All right, so we can set this aside for a moment. We have created the base of our book. All right, so that's exciting, right? We're moving right along. Okay, so let's set this aside. And the next thing that we want to do is to create our binding. Now our binding is what all of our pages will attach to. Let me bring over the original album for a moment. When I was doing this album, I chose to have 4 pages in mind with 1/2-inch gussets in between each page because I liked a lot of flips, flip outs, and little fun pockets and things like that. So these 4 pages are the main base pages that will go onto the actual hinges. And then of course, they also have a pocket on the side. So you have to create, you know, your pages. You need to, before you start your book, you want to make sure you know how many pages you want, because that's going to determine the width of your spine and all of that good stuff. So the reason why my spine was 2.5 is because I have 4 pages and 1/2-inch gusset in between. Gusset just simply means the space in between each page. Okay? So in order to do that, you want to cut a piece of whatever color cardstock you're working with to 8.5 by 8.5. Our pages inside of our book, remember our chipboard, our actual base of our book, okay, is 7 by 9. But our pages are 6.5 by 8.5. And I make my binding the same height as my pages. You want to go ahead and grab your scoreboard now. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, I always start at 1.5 inches. I like to have 1.5 inches on each side, because I find that that just gives lots of stability to my binding and to my book. So I always start with a score line at 1.5 inches. I am now going to score it every 1/2 inch through 7 inches. So my next score will be at 2 inches. My next will be at 2.5. My next will be at 3. Next will be 3.5. Next will be 4. 4.5. 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, and 7. And that leaves 1.5 inches on either end of the cardstock to just supply a good base for this binding mechanism inside of my book. Now, as you can see, this is the side that I scored on, right? So this is the dented side of the score line. You turn it over and you see the bumpy side. Let's go ahead and turn it over. And if you're new, I think you'll find this trick, new to mini album making, I think you'll find what I'm about to do very helpful. Sometimes I still do it, quite frankly. Just helps. Again, I'm a hobbyist. I don't do these or claim to be an expert at mini album making whatsoever. So I'm just a hobbyist, and this is how I do it, and it helps keep me straight. So I'm going to number these score spaces, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So you should have 11 actual score spaces on the back of this paper, okay? Now, 1 and 2 are going to combine together to create a hinge for page 1. 3 is going to be a gusset, or the space in between page 1 and page 2, so I'm going to put a G there. 4 and 5 will make a hinge for page 2. 6 will be a space or a gusset. 7 and 8 will make a hinge for page 3. 9 will be a gusset, and 10 and 11 will make a hinge for page 4. That means that 1 and 2 need to connect together. 4 and 5 need to connect together. 7 and 8 need to connect together, and 10 and 11 need to connect together. So what we want to do now is grab our 3/8 of an inch score tape. I'm going to turn it this way because it's just a little bit easier for me to see, and my head won't be in the camera. Now, some people, when they're doing this, will put tape on 1 and 2, because we know 1 and 2 have to come together to create that first hinge. I find that it is enough for me to just put tape on 2, 5, 8, and 11. Again, I'm frugal with my score tape, and that's the way that I do it. But if you want to tape 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 10 and 11, you can absolutely do that. That is a personal choice. Before I lay any tape down, I'm going to fold at the score line between 1 and 2. because we know that those two are going to be connected. I'm going to give it a little burnish and then pull it back out. And then going to add my 3/8 of an inch score tape to my number 2 little column here. Alrighty, and then go ahead and tear that. I'm going to give that tape a burnish now. I'm going to peel off the backing and then repeat that same fold, folding 1 into 2. Now we have a score line here on the dented side, remember? And we're just going to pull that towards us. Give that a nice burnish with your bone folder. And if we turn this over briefly, you can see there's hinge number 1. Okay, there's our first hinge that our first page will go on. But let's turn it back over because we're going to stick to this side. When we're all done, by the way, the only numbers you should be able to see on the back are 3, 6, and 9, which are our 1/2 inch gussets or spaces in between our pages. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Give that a nice burnish. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put tape on 5. Again, you could put tape on 4 as well if that makes you more comfortable and you want that extra sticky. I'm just going to put tape on 5. Whatever you do though, make sure that you leave all of the gussets alone. So no tape anywhere near space number 3. Leave that space completely alone because that's our gusset. Before I remove the tape, I'm going to do the folding 4 into 5. Now I'm going to remove the tape backing and then stick it. Repeat that same fold, stick it together, and then fold back. And now, as you can see, we're now only seeing 3 and 6. 4 and 5 have disappeared because they have created the gusset here for page number 2. Okay, so let's turn it back over and keep going. I'm going to put tape on 8. You could put tape on 7 too if you want. I'm just going to put tape on 8. Remember, leave 6, which is your gusset, alone. Do not put any tape anywhere near space number 6. All right, so now I'm going to fold 7 into 8 without removing the tape first, just to get it going where it needs to go. I'm going to fold it back, remove the tape backing, and then I will now connect 7 and 8. Okay, and then we'll give this a burnish, and then we'll pull this back. And now look, we only see 3, 6, and 9 of our gussets. Remember I said when we're all said and done, that's all we're going to see on the back. So I'm going to give this some nice burnishing with my bone folder. And now I'm going to grab tape and do one more on number 11. Again, you can do 10 as well if you like. I'm just going to put tape on 11. For me, I found that sufficient, but you do whatever makes you comfortable. I'm going to burnish the tape. I'm going to fold 10 into 11. All right, and then we'll remove the tape and repeat that fold one last time. So now they're stuck together, and then we simply pull back. And now all we see on the back, as I promised, is 3, 6, and 9, right? And those are our 1/2 inch gussets or spaces between our pages. We turn it over, and now we have 4 hinges for 4 pages for this album, okay? Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. And then we have that 1.5 inch space on either side just to give some stability to our binding mechanism and to our book. So I like to kind of play with my hinges. I like to kind of make them go back and forth just to get that paper used to bending. Now the next thing that we have to do, right, is we have to attach this binding to our book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the hinges facing in the same direction and turn this back over. And I want to cover the entirety of the back of this binding mechanism with score tape. To save some time, I'm going to use some big rolls of score tape. This is 1 inch. If you don't have, again, the only reason to do this, there's no other benefit other than it's quicker. So if you don't have the larger rolls of score tape, that's perfectly fine. You can even do this with 1/4 inch tape. It doesn't matter, just as long as every kind of inch of the back of this mechanism is covered in score tape. That's all you need to worry about. It doesn't matter which size you're using. Like I said, this just goes a little quicker, and for the video, you know, I didn't want this part to be too long, so I'm just going to use some larger width score tape to get the job done a little bit quicker. But you use whatever you have. I do recommend score tape though, and not glue. This is the most important functional part of your book, structural part of your book. So you want to make sure that this binding mechanism is covered in score tape. All right, so that's done. And then we have a little piece left here. And again, you want the whole thing covered. So I'm just going to take a 3/8 piece to cover that last little section. All right, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and burnish quickly here this tape so it gets nice and stuck into the fibers of that cardstock. And then I'm gonna flip it over, and we wanna put tape on either side of the hinge. Now when you're doing this, you wanna take your 3/8, I do recommend using 3/8 inch tape, but if you only have a 1/4 inch, that will work, all right? But what you want to do is place the tape to the very top of the hinge. You don't want there to be tape down here in the score lines where the hinge bends, okay? So you want that tape right along the top of the hinge. So I'm just going to take my 3/8 inch here. I'm going to stick it right at the top of the hinge all the way down. And then I'm just going to use my little tool here to rip it. I'm going to do the same side of each hinge first, and then we'll turn it over and do the other side. Okie dokie, let's see. All right. Remember, no score tape down by the score lines where those hinges bend. Otherwise, your pages won't turn correctly. Now I'm turning it the other way so we can hit the other sides of the binding mechanism with the score tape. And I know that this does use quite a bit of score tape, and I know score tape isn't the cheapest thing on the planet, but believe me, it is necessary. This is such a great product, score tape is, that it's absolutely necessary to keep your book lasting forever. I have books that I've made, you know, years and years ago that I made with score tape that have been through 3 moves and they're in perfect condition. So definitely can't recommend score tape enough. All right, so now with this little pull, we have our hinges all score taped up. We're gonna go ahead and burnish the tape on either side of the hinges with our bone folder here. Now, if you'll recall, I told you some people do things differently. This is just the way that I do it, okay? I made my hinges the same height as my pages, so this is 8.5, okay? That means, though, that I need to miter the corners of my hinges, because if I have the same exact length of a page trying to go on top of this, you know, squared off hinge, it's not going to go on smoothly. So to miter the corners of my hinge, all I'm doing, I'm taking my scissors and I'm just gonna cut a little tiny snippet or triangle off of the hinge itself, okay? So you're not cutting into the gusset or anything like that. You're just gonna cut a little tiny triangle there out of the hinge itself. Do you guys see that? Super easy to do. And there are, like I said, there are other ways people do this. Some people just make the hinge mechanism a little bit smaller than the pages, and that's certainly a perfectly fine way to do it. As I started off this video, I'm an amateur. This is a hobby, and so I've tried different ways, and I just do what works best for me and for my personal family photos and memories, and you know, it's just how I make them. But again, you just do whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, either way, it's going to be fine and beautiful. Okay, so now that that's done, it's now time to adhere this binding mechanism to our book. All right, so what I do is I go ahead and bring my book over, okay? And now I'm going to do a little bit of measuring. We know that the spine is 2.5 inches, so I just put my ruler down here, all right? And line it up with the spine itself. So I just have it nice and lined up here along the bottom of the spine. We know that we want the first hinge to hit at 1/2 inch and the second hinge to hit at 2. And that will make it centered within the spine, right? Because 1/2 inch over, 1/2 inch over, this would be 2.5 to 2 and 0 to 1/2 inch. So I just make little pencil marks right there. We also know that we made this mechanism 1/2 inch smaller than the length of our spine. So I come up 1/4 inch and I draw a little pencil mark, and I come down 1/4 inch from the top and draw a pencil mark. And that's all I need to do to make sure that I get this binding perfectly straight. And then I'm just gonna dry fit it, which just simply means I'm not taking any tape off yet, I'm just giving it a look. And that is perfect right there, just like that. Okay, so you have this little mark up here that shows where to start it, the little mark down here, and then the two little tick marks where you want this hinge and this hinge to be. So now that I have those all in place, I can take the tape backings off of the back of my binding mechanism. I'm going to grab my little pick tool just to make it a little bit easier. Again, I wish I knew the actual name of this tool or what else it does, but I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off here. Okay. The main and most important part of adhering this down is you want to make sure that your binding, that's why I made these pencil marks, your binding needs to be straight in the middle. Preciseness doesn't matter a whole lot all of the time in paper crafting. You know, we can kind of fiddle with things, and if it's not perfectly straight, it's okay. But for mini album making, if you want the pages to turn and look nice and for it to look like and feel like a book, you definitely want the binding mechanism to be straight. And that's why I just did that brief measuring really quickly to find out where the center was, where I wanted those hinges to be. And that's all you have to do. If you just take those extra seconds, you will get it perfect. Right now, I just had a little bit of tape coming outside of the cardstock, so I'm bending that over onto itself so you don't have tape sticking out. All right, so now all I have to do is line this back up again where I had it before. And there's my mark there. If my head's in, I apologize. And there we go. That looks perfect. And I feel confident. That looks really straight and good to me. So I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to take my pencil before I forget and just erase these little pencil lines here. You just erase right up. Of course, if you were using black cardstock, you might not even need to erase them, quite frankly. But I'm also going to erase this little bit of writing I have on the binding part. You'd probably decorate that with cardstock anyway. I often put little strips of designer paper in between my gussets, but just in case I don't, that's gone now too. All right. So now what I like to do now that we have the binding mechanism in place, it's nice and centered in the book, is I like to take my bone folder and I use the kind of the non-pointy end. And I like to give in between the gussets a good burnish so that this really gets nice and stuck to that spine. And I'm just going to do that all around. Now remember these 1/8 inch spacers here, right? So if I bend the cover of the book a little bit, you can see you start to see that little crease there. That's the spacer, right? We want to get the cardstock nice and into that sticky tape. So I'm just using my bone folder and very gently letting that fold into and become attached to that particular piece of 1/8 inch tape. I'm going to slowly fold this up like so. And I'm going to do the same thing now to the other side. So I start by slowly folding it up just a little bit. And once I can start to see the crease, I'll then go ahead and take my bone folder and just apply a little tiny bit of pressure and push the paper into that crease or to that spacer. And then I'm going to slowly bend it. All right? I'm going to do it again, just continuing to burnish here. You just want this nice and stuck down, so don't feel like you're wasting your time with this burnishing. It's very helpful, and it will help the overall outcome of your project. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a little bit of a bend now, and I'm going to give this a little bit of a bend. There we go. And so our book is coming together very nicely. All right, so here's our book. You open it up, and voila, there is our hinges. Our hinge mechanism is all nice and stuck down and ready to go. We have these nice creases in it, and we're done with that part. The next thing I like to do is I like to put coverings over the front and back inside covers. Now, you don't have to do this step. You know, we always decorate our inside covers, right, with pockets or design paper or whatever, but I just don't like the way this looks. So what I do is I take 2 pieces of the same color cardstock I'm using and just cover that up like that. And it just makes it look really, really nice. So these 2 pieces were cut at 6 7/8 by 8 7/8. And I'm just going to use art glitter glue for this. Since we're on the inside of the book now, I'm just going to use some glitter glue for this. I find that that works fine for me, but if you prefer score tape, you can definitely use score tape, whichever you are comfortable with. All right, and then I'm just going to center this nice and centered on this inside front cover. Okay, And I'm going to do the same thing now with the inside of the back cover. I just feel it gives it a little bit more of a polished look. But again, this is an optional step and one that you do not have to do if you prefer not to. I'm going to center this one as well, just on the inside here of this back cover. Beautiful. Okay, I'm just going to give it a nice little burnish now. And now it just, to me, looks a little bit more finished. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to work on are our pages. Now, for this video, I'm just going to do the base page. And in the next video is where we will be creating the flaps and pockets that are specific to the design that I came up with for this Ladies Diary album. So if you're using other papers or, you know, have a completely different project idea in mind, but you want your album to be 7x9, you could watch this video and then ignore all the rest of them and just use this base album and, you know, go forward with whatever you want to create, okay? So I thought that would be a good stopping point for the first tutorial, because that way, if you're not interested in the Ladies Diary but something else, then you know how to make the base now in this size and the base pages, and then you can add whatever flaps you want if you're not interested in the book that I made, which is perfectly fine. So let's do the pages quickly. I'm going to set this aside, okay? And our pages are 6.5 by 8.5, which again is a 1/2 inch smaller than our chipboard covers, okay? And so what you want to do is they're 6.5 by 9, and what you do is score at a 1/2 inch on the 9-inch side. And so then once they are folded, they are 6.5 by 8.5. So you take 2 pieces to create 1 page. Let me go over that again because I don't think I made very good sense there. You take 2 pieces of cardstock, whatever color you're working with, all right? And these are cut at 6.5 by 9, 6.5 by 9, and you need 2 of them, okay? On the 9-inch side, you score a 1/2 inch on both of them. You do the same exact thing for both pieces of cardstock. So let's go ahead and fold on our score lines, okay? All right, then we're going to grab our 3/8 inch tape, score tape. Remember I said I use score tape for all of my building of my book itself and all of the building of my pages. I only use the glitter glue for adhering paper, basically to paper. Except I did use the glitter glue to adhere the cardstock to the inside front cover because I found that works fine for me, but if you want to use score tape for that, you absolutely can. All right. So now what we do is we have these 2 pieces of paper, right? And they are 9 inches by 6.5, score on the 9-inch side at 1/2 inch. Go ahead and apply that tape and then burnish. And now what you want to do is you want to adhere. You're not going to adhere, of course, flap to flap. You're going to turn it this way. And you're going to adhere flap to non-flap part to create your pocket page. Now the way I like to do this is I just start on one end and I peel off just a little bit of the tape backing and fold it towards me. See how I've done that there? That helps me kind of get this exactly where I want it. And I still have some wiggle room on the right side because I haven't taken that tape backing off yet, so I'm not committed. So I can get it exactly where I want it. That looks good. And then I can peel that tape backing off and then just burnish that down. We're going to do the same thing now on the other side. So I'm just going to peel a little bit of that tape backing off, lay this down. Now you don't want to pull, okay? You don't want to pull this because then your base page is going to have a bubble in it. You want it to just lay it very softly and gently on top, get it lined up and lay it on top of this folded flap. Once you have it where you want it, go ahead and pull off the remainder of the score tape backing, give it a burnish, and this is your pocket page, okay? So we'll just mark this one as page 1. And now if we bring over our book, just so you get the idea of how this is going to work, right? This has a pocket on both long sides, right? So it's going to go onto the hinge on this side. See how it fits perfectly now that we mitered those corners, right? So this fits perfectly. And so this will be closed up because we would eventually peel the tape, the score tape off of the hinge. And now that's where you get your side pocket for a large photo mat as well. Does that make sense? So, but right now we're just constructing the pages. So I'm going to set the base of the book back aside. We got page 1 done. We're going to do the exact same thing for page 2. So these are 6.5 by 9. You have 2 of them. On the 9-inch side, you score at 1/2 inch. Go ahead and fold on your score lines. Give it a little bit of a burnish. And then you want to go ahead and apply your 3/8 inch score tape if you have it. If you don't, then 1/4 inch will work. 1/2 inch will be too big though. Okay, so either use 3/8 or 1/4. Apply your tape to both of those flaps. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give the tape a burnish with my bone folder. And now I'm going to do the same thing. So we're adhering flap to non-flap side. So it's going to look like this. All right, I'm going to do the same thing I did with page number 1. I'm just going to pull off a little bit of the tape backing. And I'm going to go ahead and lay this on top, get it where I want it, stick down on that, just that little end there. And then I still have wiggle room for the rest of it. I'll get it exactly how I want it there. All right, and then pull off the remainder of the backing of the score tape. Give it a nice burnish. We're going to do the same thing now with the other end. Okay, so I'm just going to pull off a little bit of the tape. Remember, just gently let it rest how it would naturally. Okay, don't pull it or your base page will get a bubble. So just let it rest as it naturally would. And then go ahead and pull off the remainder of that score tape and give it a nice burnish. And here is page number 2. So we can go ahead and pencil in page 2 on this one. Because all of the 4 pages are the exact same steps, I already went ahead off camera before filming this and did page 3 and page 4. They are done exactly the same way, same measurements, same everything, so you don't have to worry about that. I just didn't want to bore you guys by doing the same thing 4 times. So there you go. So now we have all 4 pages done. Now at this point you have a couple different options. You can either leave these out of your book, wait till the next video tutorial, and then adhere all the flaps with the pages out of the book, or you can go ahead and adhere them to the book now. I do all of my, not decorating with designer paper, but I do all of my planning and preparing of my pages in terms of the pockets and flaps while the pages are out of the book. For me, that's just how I have found. I've tried it both ways, and to me, that way works best. So I will not be putting mine in my book at this time. I will show you how to do that at the end of the second video tutorial. Once we have all the flaps and pockets down, we'll together put them all in the book. So I will show you how to do that. If, however, you like to have your base pages in the book and then apply your flaps and pockets from there, all you need to do is you can go ahead and do that now, and you would simply fit these over, make sure that they all fit properly first. So I like to dry fit them all first, and then you know the drill. You'd peel off the score tape one side at a time, stick it down, and make sure everything's all nice and lined up, and your pages would just go in, one on this hinge, the second one on this hinge, the third one on this hinge, and the fourth one on this hinge, okay? But again, that's not how I personally like to do it. I like to do my flaps and pockets with the pages out of the book. I just find it's a little bit easier, and it really is easier when I'm designing a book from scratch. So I'm gonna just show you the way that I do it. You do it however you want, no right or wrong, okay? So this is going to be the end of the part 1 tutorial for the Ladies Diary. All right, so this is where we're headed, and this is what we have so far, plus we have our base pages done. So again, if you just want to make your own, 7 by 9 inch book, but with different papers or whatever, then you're probably good just watching this tutorial and you can be done. But if you would like to know how to create this book, then stay tuned for videos number 2 and 3, which will be coming soon. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope this is helpful. Remember, there is no right or wrong way to do anything. I'm just showing you the way that I do it. I'm in no way an expert, but hopefully it helps someone. You guys seem to like the album, so hopefully these tutorials will be helpful. All right, but congratulations if you've made it this far. You have made your book and you've made your pages, and that's pretty darn cool. So I hope you had fun. I hope you'll stick with me and join me when tutorial number 2 is out, part 2 is out. Thanks, guys, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.